Good evening, everyone. I hope all is well. Welcome to the North Park Civic Association Town Hall with Assemblywoman Missy Miller. You can clap right here. That's where you can clap. Yes, we appreciate you. You're a very busy woman and you have a lot of work to do. They have questions, I'm sure. This meeting will be broken up into several segments for those who do not know. Does anyone need an agenda? Our agenda will be as following. We will start our opening as we do normally with an induction and a prayer. Everyone, please bow your heads. Most gracious and heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you, God, for this time and this moment. God, we're asking, God, that you just give us a heart for the people, God, that we can meet the needs of your people and that we can have understanding. And we can also have our questions and needs met by those who are governing over us. Give us all wisdom in all things. We ask these things of your Son, Jesus. In his holy name we pray, amen. All right. We're going to have our brother Marcus Tinker come with an introduction to our Assemblywoman, Missy Miller.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Tinker. I'm a member of the North Park Civic Association. We are glad to host this town hall with our New York State Assemblywoman, Melissa Miller. There's a lot I could say about her, but I'd rather you hear it from her. So I introduce to some and present to others, New York State Assemblywoman, Melissa Miller.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. So when Marcus asked me if I had any interest in doing this, I was thrilled to do it. He and I speak a lot. We like to partner on things. We like to make sure that I am always, we like to make sure that I'm always informed and that I always know what the needs are of all of my constituents and the various different communities that the district makes up. So I always appreciate an opportunity to come and address this community. I've made many friends here over the years. From what I understood, we were going to break this up into several different categories and open up for questions on these different categories. So if that's how we'll do it, okay. The first category was COVID-19, obviously a hot topic, and the vaccine and how to stop the spread and what's going on. So what I can tell you most recently is, as you're probably aware, there are a lot of vaccine mandates being rolled out by the new governor, Governor Hochul. She started with a lot of the healthcare workforce. The governor feels that it's very important that the people who are seeing patients have been vaccinated. It's been a little bit of a struggle. There are some healthcare workers who feel that they should have their, decision to vaccinate be their decision, not government's decision. And that's a whole different story for another time. But the facts are that because of these mandates, New York State has, I believe today's numbers were like a 90% of the healthcare workforce has had at least one vaccination, which is pretty good. There was a lot of concern about having many staff shortages in hospitals and healthcare environments, nursing homes, those kind of things. And hopefully we're not going to be facing that if these numbers continue. And as far as the mask mandates, that's always something that has been controversial from the start, from the very beginning of the pandemic. It was don't wear a mask, it's unnecessary. That changed very quickly to wear a mask, wear 2 masks, wear only the N95 mask. There's been controversy throughout. It persists. The information that we get from the CDC is pretty much what the state will try to follow. So they are, hoping that people will be at least respectful and wear masks when they're in a congregate environment with other people. Outdoors, they're not recommending that it's necessary. But if you're in an enclosed area, they are still recommending. They did say that if you're with your family, if you're planning holidays for Thanksgiving or Christmas, if you're all vaccinated and you're comfortable, it's really no need to wear a mask in your homes or wherever you're gathering. So that's pretty much the most recent update. I don't know if there's any questions.
Okay, my question is, what is New York State doing to encourage non-vaccinated individuals to take the vaccine?
Well, they're doing a little more than encouraging, they're mandating in a lot of places. So that's a strong form of encouragement. And there are different incentives. There are, in New York City, for example, they're offering money if you get vaccinated. There are bonuses. I know within the workforce, they're offering a vaccine bonus if you're willing to get vaccinated. If you refer somebody to get vaccinated, there are incentives. So that's what they are doing to try and encourage. Another question.
So I have another question. New York City is making it mandated that if you're indoors for a function, if you're at a restaurant, except if you're having food or drink in your mouth, you have to have your mask on, you have to be vaccinated. To go to a sporting event or to a play or a sporting, anything like that, you have to have the vaccine. Now, New York City has it. Long Island, Nassau County, Suffolk County, even Westchester County has it mandated. But because we're so close to New York City and a lot of us are in the same areas, whether it's work, school, hanging out, do you think Westchester, Nassau County, and Suffolk County should do the same mandate that New York City is doing, or should they not?
This is just personal opinion, my personal opinion. I think New York City is very, very dense, way denser than the surrounding suburbs of Long Island and Westchester. So, the thinking in New York City is that even if you're outdoors walking on the street, you're very close to the person next to you. Whereas we have the ability to spread out more. We have the ability, and I think that there has been some attempt to be able to still socially distance even when indoors, so that does not have to become a mandate. And personally, I hope that it doesn't. I think as long as we can socially distance, if people are vaccinated, if there's enough outdoor activities. A lot of the restaurants and on Long Island, Nassau County, they've extended the outdoor permits for dining and restaurants. So, I think that people are choosing to be outdoors more and be socially distanced. I think people are respecting that enough, and I hope that it stays that way. Any more?
The different types of vaccines that you get, is it any different than the ones you got like Janssen and all the other vaccines that you get? Will they have a nervous effect on people, like you said, if you didn't have the flu shot or anything that's on medication?
Well, those are concerns that even the state, we recommend that you go through everything with your personal physicians, because if you have a tendency to have a reaction to certain vaccinations, and that's something you need to definitely discuss with your personal physician. As far as the 3 vaccines that are available, they also each have different side effect profiles. And some of them, you feel nothing. Like that, people report the Johnson & Johnson, they really have way less side effect profile. Maybe your doctor would recommend that vaccine for you. And there has been some question also about, do you get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine at the same time? At first they were saying, yeah, sure you can. Now they've spread it out. They said, you know what, you should wait, because both of them can make you feel sick. Why get both at the same time? It's just asking for a headache, literally. So I think it's unfortunately still a learning process, and we're learning as we're going.
Do you think since like you said, the city knows that they got that COVID virus thing with the restaurants and everything, you have to show your card? Because now when you can't get it unless you've been vaccinated, you have to show the card that you have
Right.
had it. Do you think they're gonna do it out here? Because I don't know if any of the restaurants up there doing it.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know whether, that's up to the county executive, whether she would put that order in. There's a lot of, believe it or not, there's a lot of problems with the vaccine card, vaccine passport. There's a lot of fraud with it. They've arrested people for selling fake vaccine cards. It's not necessarily a guarantee that unfortunately, people are not always honest. And so it's not necessarily a guarantee. And the problem with this is that, while recognizing that we want to be able to trust that somebody's vaccinated or even have the ability to know that somebody's actually really vaccinated, we're walking a very fine line between violating HIPAA. And, as a nation, we worked very hard to get HIPAA compliance into effect so that people's medical histories and health information is private. And this crosses that line a lot, and it is voluntary. It should be voluntary, but it's something that needs to get really all the kinks need to get ironed out.
There's a question in the chat asking, do you agree with the forced mandate?
Personally, I believe that government should not be telling anybody what they should be doing to their bodies. I recognize the public health concern, and I think encouraging vaccinations are the way to go. I don't think, it's a slippery slope when we start saying that the government can mandate what we do to our bodies. And it's not just vaccination, it's vaccination in this case, but it's not just vaccination. If we start going down there, and that's a concern that I have, what else would they start mandating that maybe we don't want to do, or we're not comfortable with, or, and I also think that it has somewhat created this divisiveness, which just seems to want to exist in our climate today. That they're vaccinated, they're not vaccinated, everybody has a story. Everybody has something in their life that you don't know about. So, we should never be judging another person for what they do or are not doing. And I think that this mandate has kind of forced a little bit of that.
There are no more questions in the chat, so I guess we can go on to our section 2, mortgage relief, rental assistance for New York State residents, and eviction moratoriums.
Okay.
Very interesting.
So, as you know, when the world, and I mean literally the world, shut down for all of that time, there were a lot of people couldn't work, and there are a lot of people, they can't work, they can't pay their rent or their mortgage. And it was a strong concern. In the first few months of COVID, we had daily governor's office calls, and that was what really one of the things, other than obviously the virus and the numbers and what was going on, but the next really highest concern that people were having were, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my mortgage? Am I going to get kicked out of my house? They very early on put in the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures, but we can only really control what is, in New York State. There are a lot of mortgage companies, leasing companies that are national. They're not necessarily based in New York State. We really don't have control over those. So, in those circumstances, we urged people to try and work with their mortgage broker or their leasing company to try and come up with some kind of agreement or a compromise, acknowledging the difficulties that people were having around the world. What I can tell you most currently, there's a sheet that you can get to hand around, and I guess I can, for those on Zoom, I can email the information. But as of June 2021, this past June, we, the Office of Temporary Disability and Assistance, it's called ODITA, they began to accept applications for Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It's called IRAP. Renters and landlords can receive up to 12 months of rental arrears payments accrued on or after March 13th, 2020, which is the beginning of the pandemic, up to 3 months of additional rental assistance if the household is expected to spend 30% or more of their monthly income on rent, or up to 12 months of electric or gas utility arrears payments for arrears accrued on or after March 13th, 2020. Payments will be made directly to the landlord or the property owner or utility company on behalf of the tenant. And there's a link that you can file an application if you are in need of any of this. There have been, through September 30th, a total of 228,000 applications for this. So that tells you how strong the need was. The total assistance that has been already obligated or paid is $1.8 billion. So there's 52,701 number of payments that were issued to landlords. There's estimated value of provisionally approved tenant applications is about 1.1 billion. So this is something, that is really has affected many, many people in this state. In Nassau County alone, we've only made out of those payments 134 compared to the state, which was 52,000. So if anybody is in this situation where they need assistance with their rent, these are still available. As far as the eviction moratorium, landlords can now challenge a COVID-19 hardship declaration in court because the courts weren't open prior. And they can request a hearing on the validity of a tenant's declaration. So if they fear that somebody's just saying that they're still affected by COVID, but they're really back at work and they're just not paying, they can bring that up in court. If the court finds the hardship to be invalid, the court and landlords will move forward with eviction proceedings. If the court finds the declaration to be valid, then eviction proceedings would be held until January 15th of 2022. That's when the current moratorium expires. As far as mortgage relief, mortgage forbearance is in place until January 15th, 2022. And there's no financial assistance available through the state. And again, these are unfortunately for New York mortgage companies. A property owner possibly facing a foreclosure is recommended to reach out to their loan provider. Providers have recently taken up practices to assist in avoiding foreclosure proceedings by establishing trial payment plans and other alternative methods. So whereas before the pandemic, mortgage companies weren't necessarily really willing to negotiate with you. They had their list of how they negotiate. Now it's a little bit more liberal. They're a little bit more willing. They don't want to push people out of their homes during this time, especially. So that's the update. If there are any questions.
You said that Nassau County, I'm loud enough. You said that Nassau County rent relief did 134
applications.
And
that's how many.
paid
Oh no,
out?
that's how many. I don't know how many applications, but they've paid out 134 applications for relief. And
Why so less than New York State?
It's the amount of, well, I can find out how many applications they've actually received in Nassau County, but I suspect it's that they have not received that many applications. And I don't know, I don't know how informed a lot of people were at what their options were. And that's why this is a good thing to have, because it lets people know this is available, this is available. I post things on my website or on my Assembly Facebook page, but that's only as good as people looking at it. If somebody doesn't see it, then they don't know that's available. So It's just a, matter of communicating what is, and I suspect, but I can find out how many actual applications they have
Because
received.
I actually know someone that went through the Nassau County and it just stalled. They never got an answer, a denial, or if they needed to submit more information, or, they just never got an answer. So now they've went on further to go to New York City.
Well, even they can still use the county. What they can do, if you know them, have them call my office. We will call the county, find out where that application is, why it's stalled, and whether it needs more information or whether they can now proceed, because they are still honoring, for if people need rent relief.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Now, in regard to what you stated in regard to the assistance for the renters and the homeowners, is there a way the state can put this information out there, whether on the radio, whether on a commercial, so people who don't know can be more aware of it? Where they can be directed, okay, call this number or go to this website so you can get more information, on email this particular email address and we can respond to you, because a lot of people don't know what's out there. So I think the state needs to do a better job with getting the information out to the residents.
You have a very good point. The state has been very, very willing to do many commercials on what they feel are, important public service announcements. They're pushing to get vaccinated. They're pushing, for all, but they could just as easily be putting this out. Hey, are you having trouble paying your rent? Are you worried about paying your rent next month? Are you still, not able to pay your mortgage? Are you still not able to collect rent from somebody in your home? Those things, are not out there for the general public to find. You have to, like I said, happen across my Facebook page when, and scroll through, or go on, what Nassau County will say is, well, it's on it's on the website. You can find it on the website. I can tell you, I've searched their website plenty of times. It's not exactly the easiest website to navigate and find something. A lot of times if you put what you're looking for in the search bar, you get articles on that, not actually what you're looking for. So it's a point well taken. I think that we could do a better job on the state level and the county level to communicate this to the people.
You have another question in the chat that says, should they expand ERAP to those who pay less than 30% due to the cost of living price increase for daily goods? How can that demographic be helped?
That's an interesting dynamic, because this formulation was, from June and probably worked on before that. But I think we're all experiencing that prices are going up on everything, from food, to home, and health goods, and no matter what you're buying, everything's more expensive. And so maybe they should reformulate that, come up with something that takes that into consideration. So the next.
Whatever happened, they said, to the affordable housing program?
It's funny, that should be a question. I have been trying to find just one person who has been in need of finding affordable housing. And I am beyond disillusioned at the responses that I get when we call these different, it's on hold. The waiting lists are we're not accepting applications. How is that an acceptable answer at all? This one person who I'm trying to help is stuck in a hospital. Can't get out because she needs a place to go. And the answers that I'm getting are, unfortunately, it's on hold. We're backed up. There's a terrible backlog. It's something that needs attention, and it needs attention yesterday. It's something I'm advocating for probably daily at this point.
Many of ours get a petition signed for that very purpose.
Where are those petitions?
I turned them in to the gentleman in Hempstead who was in charge of the program.
Okay, I would love to know what they're doing with that, because it seems that nobody has an answer other than we know. You know, that doesn't make it okay, just acknowledging it. It's, you know, it should be, we have to figure out, we're going to do this. Sit down and meet on that and figure out how we're going to open this back up. There are too many people in need.
There'll be no further questions about the mortgage relief, rental assistance, or eviction moratoriums. We could go ahead and move on to our third segment, employment,
Okay.
jobs.
Okay, so I will say, when the pandemic started, one of the things that kept my office busiest after about, I would say 3 or 4 weeks after the initial pandemic and the concern, you know, was unemployment. The New York State system was not equipped, structurally equipped, to handle the influx of claims and applications that they were receiving. And we spent, I would say, a good 5 or 6 months trying to get people enrolled, trying to make sure that they were able to, you know, they had to add staff to work 24 hours at the Department of Labor to get these claims, you know, applications processed and going. Nobody anticipated the length of the pandemic. Nobody anticipated that they would continue to be out of work for a year or a year and a half. And now that things are opening and people, you know, we're finding, you know, last year in the spring when things started reopening, there were a lot of places of business. And even, you know, it's not just places of business, it was in hospitals, group homes, day programs, programs for seniors that couldn't get staff. People who had been home on unemployment because everything was closed weren't going back to work because they were making more money staying home than they were when they were working because of the extra stimulus in the unemployment. That was extended several times, and it created an unintended workforce shortage in this state. I don't know about other states, but it certainly created that here. Now that that has ended and unemployment has gone back to its regular formula of, you know, how they pay, we are hoping that we see more and more people going back to work. We understand that people are still nervous about, you know, this Delta variant that's out. People are nervous about it. Some people aren't comfortable, or, you know, we're hoping that more and more businesses will allow the remote option and allow people to continue to do some work from home. We're finding that a lot of businesses in Manhattan, a lot of the big businesses and law firms, they are allowing split schedules where you can do some work from home a couple of days a week and only go into, you know, into the office a couple of days a week. So we're hoping that more and more people just naturally will go back to work because of that, you know, drop in the unemployment benefit, and will go back to its regular amount. There are a lot of jobs available. There are a lot of places to find it. Again, I think, you know, if you're looking, it's easy enough to find certain areas. You know, there's the market job search places, Indeed, and, you know, those places. But New York State has, the Department of Labor has on their website a job search engine. So you can put in looking for a job in specialized services for specific categories of job seekers, like veterans or people with disabilities or agricultural workers. So you can really specify what area or, you know, what need you have looking for a job. There are resources for New York State regional career centers, career development services, and there's links to the New York State official job bank and even youth employment services. So there are plenty of resources that are on the Department of Labor's website. That is on the paper that I handed out also, so that people can go on there and search. I also know, and only because I get an email that the MTA is desperately looking for people to work, and they have from as far up as management all the way to, you know, collecting tickets or conductors or line workers. They need people across the board at the MTA. Any questions?
The issues with employment has been from people who have come to North Park Civic looking for employment, that there is employment in the service industry. But if I was an insurance regulator or accounts payable or accounts receivable and they downsize, then that's not available again for me. There's been a huge, tremendous cutback in HR. There's been, certain jobs are not coming back in the labor force. And so other people are having a different experience. Do we have anything that speaks to those type of situations?
Well, unfortunately, the pandemic has changed the demographics significantly. Like you said, there are certain fields that have just been narrowed or, you know, slimmed down so much simply because they have found that there is not a demand or a need for that, or that they can operate and function well with less. And so they're doing just that. You know, hopefully as the economy picks back up and things get booming again, there will once again be the need for more of those jobs. But again, I think it's, you know, nobody anticipated the far-reaching, you know, problems that have been created secondarily by this pandemic, and that's one of them. There are certain, you know, jobs that have just been really just disappeared because of this. Hopefully they will come back. They have, to my knowledge, there's not anything being done currently to change that.
Okay, with regard to jobs, my question has to do with, does the state offer any kind of training for people to get certified or learn new skills because of the changing job market right now with this pandemic?
On the Department of Labor's website, there are lists of jobs, and many of them will include training, depending on what the job is, but many of them do include training.
No more questions in the jobs department. We can now move on to our education and tutorial for students struggling with virtual learning.
Okay, so another one of those very unfortunate consequences of this pandemic, you know, all of our students, every single one of them in New York State, was forced to stay home for a year. If you know, there were some that were half in, half out last year, but for the most part, all of the students were forced to rely on this remote learning. And for a significant part of those students, it was a struggle, if not impossible. Somebody like my son, you can see my son, he cannot learn or get therapy virtually. So he was home for a year and a half and lost many, many skills and regressed in many areas because there was nothing available for him that would have been appropriate. Now that everybody's back in school, and there's been a strong push to have everybody back in buildings and back in school, and for the most part they are, maybe, you know, a closing here or there for a day if there was a, you know, a positive case, or, but they really are getting people back. But what they're seeing is the consequence of that year or so trying to learn virtually. You know, there's a reason that teachers are in the classroom. There's a reason you can't do a lab virtually. There are so many state ed requirements that just cannot be fulfilled when you're you know, doing it remotely. And they are now suffering the repercussions of that. All of these students are back in buildings, but there has been learning loss. I asked the state, are we doing anything about that? Like, you know, are we offering anything? What are we doing as a state education department? What are we doing to address this? Their answer basically I said, is there some kind of like a tutoring program that we can offer for these students? Through the schools, the state ed would offer it through the schools and to address where they need to catch up. And the short answer is no, there is nothing like that. They did answer back with the following academic and social supports that are provided. And basically, that is using the federal money. The state received a lot of federal money, the American Rescue Plan money, and they're using that to address a lot of this learning loss. New York is receiving a total of $8.9 billion in this American Rescue Plan money. They're primarily targeting the academic impact of lost instructional time, and they invested in summer learning programs, and they are going to expand after-school programs. They don't specify whether that's tutoring programs or what exactly they are, and I fear that state ed a lot, what they do is they kind of leave it up to the districts themselves. So some districts may be phenomenal and do great things, and other districts may not really do great things at all. So it's, I would almost rather that they put something out that is uniform throughout all the schools and say, this is what we should be doing with this money. But nobody's listening to me at the state ed department. They did release something called Return to School Roadmap. That provides key resources and supports for students, parents, educators, and school communities. And it outlines how the federal funding can support the safe and sustained return to in-person learning. The state ed department is investing $195 million of its emergency reserve funds, that's not the federal money, to fund new full-day pre-kindergarten programs for 4-year-olds and expand existing programs. The pandemic dramatically impacted those preschool kids, especially with being home on computers, and you don't get to even socialize. That age is such a important age, so they are investing in that. They also have what they call their mental health initiative. They're supporting the students and the educators and the families, their emotional and mental health needs. This was very, very hard on so many of the students. So many felt isolated. They were unsure, they lost confidence. It was just so much unknown. Imagine how, we know how we felt as adults and didn't know what was happening. Nothing ever had happened like this in the world before. So imagine how these kids feel, and especially teen years, there's so much angst to begin with, and then you have this. So they're seeing a lot of mental health, problems and issues and concerns. So they are putting funding into that and addressing that also. So it's, again, they are using money to try and address some of the learning loss, but I just wish it were better defined how they're addressing that.
Hello, Assemblywoman Missy Miller. I'm Ronald McKenna. I'm a educator, and I understand that you said you don't understand how they're using $9 billion to address some of the issues. What's concerning me is that there's all of this federal funding, but they just got rid of all of these teachers. How are they trying to help education in the gap because of remote learning, but yet letting go of teachers because of the vaccine? That's part one. And my part two question is, we understand that remote learning pushed back on education, but for the health of the child, now we notice that there's this push for education in the building, but there is no sort of protection for the kids when it comes to COVID. I remember at least last year in the building, there was readily testing. Now it's almost as if I rarely see tests. They say it's a pandemic for those who don't have the vaccine, but most people that don't have the vaccine are children and minors. And so what is the concern of the state about the health of our children?
Well, I think that they're desperate to protect the health of the children, which is why they mandated the vaccines for teachers, why they mandated that children in school have to continue to wear masks when there was such a push from so many to not have them wear masks in the building. There was a lot of concern that it affects their development, their socialization, their, confidence. So the state is really committed to trying to protect the health of the children. They do have, I believe all classrooms still have the barriers. They're encouraging proper hygiene, hand washing, that kind of stuff. But until the vaccine is eligible, for those younger children, they're going to be that risk, the unvaccinated. I know a lot of parents are going to have a lot of concern about vaccinating their younger children. We're going to start hearing that when that vaccine comes out for them. I think it's, such a personal issue and an individual issue. And again, this is where, my philosophy is, I personally don't think government should ever be saying, you have to do this to your body. You have to ingest this, you have to do this. I personally don't think so. I think it should be a personal choice. I think it should be a parent's choice for a child. Recognizing that the children are best off in building, in school, in learning. They're doing the best they can with what they know and what they have. And as far as the money that you referenced, I think, like I said, I'm grateful that they're taking that money and investing it in what was, learning loss from being remote for so long. But I think that they can do a better job at defining how they are going to address this learning loss. Are they going, offering a statewide tutoring program in every single district for different subjects would be a great explanation of how they're spending that money. But that's not what we get. For all we know, any one district can spend it on, summer school, not offering any tutoring at all. So it's just too sporadic for me. I would rather it be more clearly defined.
Yes, I want to refer back to with the distribution of funds where the government always thinks he knows best for people. Was distributing money like, oh, $300 for this kid, free for this one, and free for that one. And the people were just making a fool out of the government. They was going on trips, doing all kind of crazy things. Now, what the government needs to do is to get in touch with ordinary people who live and have wisdom in everyday life from our community, from our arena, and they would help them to make wiser decisions, because some of the things that have happened is the teetotal disgrace, and the government looks like fools in certain areas. Somebody needs to address that. If they give me a chance, I sure would address it.
I couldn't agree more. I won't even get started on the former governor. His priority was clearly never children, seniors, people with disabilities. Those were way, way, way down at the priority list. We were hopeful that Governor Hochul will have a little bit more compassion and a little bit more relatability. The former governor didn't meet with people. It wasn't his thing. Didn't meet with people. Even though we were the ones that elect him, we're the ones that he's supposed to be representing, but yet it wasn't his thing to meet with people. We're hoping that this governor is more willing to do what you say. let's go meet our constituents in all the different communities and hear what they think they need. Maybe then we can do better as a government. Hello, Ms. Moore.
Hey, good evening. I've been listening via Zoom, and I want to say thank you for the information that you shared so far. My question relates to community colleges. I'm aware of the fact that the American Rescue Plan has actually really benefited the community colleges, but a lot of the money has really been allocated to the upkeep of the buildings, the equipment, but not so much support of the faculty and the students. So I'm wondering where we are in terms of New York State really supporting the community colleges in light of the fact that now this year, all of the college faculty, we've really been overwhelmed because the students are coming in from the high schools and they're not on college level in terms of college reading level. There's a lot of remediation that's needed, and we don't have the support in place for that. Thanks.
I think that that's something that is emerging now. They're starting to notice, you know, that there was a big question with the sophomores and the juniors and the seniors in high school. What if they're really not getting everything that they need? And in New York State, we have this, you know, advance them. There's nobody held back. While I don't think it's fair to hold back people in grade, you know, 11 or 12 from graduating, if they truly weren't completing the required work or capable of it, they weren't having to take Regents exams, they weren't having, you know, there was, who knows what, how they were taking their final exams, if they were on Zoom, if they could have been looking at the book while they were taking the exams, like there was no oversight. And I think what's happening as a result of that is, and it's not just at the community colleges, I think they're seeing it in all of the colleges, that we're having a freshman class that's really not equipped or ready for the workload that, and you know, some of the requirements that they would have been pre-pandemic. So I think it's an emerging issue. And again, as far as how funding is allocated and spent, it seems to be a problem statewide. And it's not just in education, it's in every area that we've received federal funding. There was federal funding for rent relief that just never got distributed. Like, where was it? It took a scandal to bring that out. You know, so there's there's money out there, but how it's getting allocated and spent, really, we really need way more transparency on this and input. I will say, you know, one of the good things about in the disability world, OPWDD was receiving a ton of money in federal aid, and they actually took input from the families. Where do you think we need this? And they actually listened. And a lot of the suggestions that the families were making and saying what the needs were, they were, okay, we're going to allocate to this and this and this. They have a whole separate issue with the staffing and you know that, but at least there's an agency that actually listened and you know was trying to do the right thing. So many of the other agencies, it's just you have no idea. We have no idea. We don't know. We have to ask. I have to ask for them to research to find out. It's a problem.
So there's a question in the chat that's basically asking, they said that before the pandemic, education in New York was on a steep decline. When you look at the colleges and universities on the master's level, do we think that people in New York, the state of New York is really competing in a global market because the teachers are coming from India and Africa and China? And what is going to be the purpose of New York students as they go forward into the future?
Well, I'm hoping that we rebound. I think pre-pandemic, a large part of the problem was the whole Common Core nightmare. And it was a nightmare from start to finish. And it set back a lot of our students in a big, big way. And where they used to be, you know, competitive, and that really undid a lot of, you know, our education system for our students. So hopefully now that's that's gone, and you know, hopefully this will rebound and we can once again become the strong state educationally that we were. We have really wonderful curriculum. We have great, you know, teachers. We really have so many strengths in education in the state. So I'm hopeful that that can, I mean, if you see how many graduates, you know, we have such good graduation rates now, with more and more, they're going to good colleges. Even those that would never have gone to college they're going to community college, then they transfer to a different college. They, you know, so we really have a lot of positives. It's just something we you know, the pandemic was a setback for everything.
We have no more questions on our education and tutorial for students struggling with virtual learning. We can now move on to our section 5, which is our former New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo's policing reform.
Okay, so where do I even start with this? You know, Governor Cuomo had his strong points and he had his not so strong points. I think that this all came from the fact that, and this was, you know, well before George Floyd. Okay, so I think that there needed to be recognition that the bail system in our state was not working. You can't hold somebody for bail that's selling joints on the street when they're 15 years old and they sit in jail for 3 years learning all kinds of bad things and becoming criminals because they didn't have the bail money to get out. Where somebody else, 15-year-old in a different area doing the same crime, gets out of jail, done. You know, so there was never a question that that system needed to be reformed. That went way overboard. Nobody, you know, when you discuss bail reform, removing cash bail reform or sliding scale, or, you know, looking at all the variables, how it crossed over into no judicial discretion. The judges couldn't even, the judges would have somebody who was before them 20 times, repeating crime after crime, and not be able to say, hey, this guy needs to stay. He's been, you know, he's hurting people. So it just went too far. And I think when you go too far and it emboldened people who probably would never have been emboldened to keep committing crimes before. They were like, well, there's no consequence. It's a processing. I'm in and out. I can do it again. They removed the consequence of the experience of paying the price for committing a crime. And so I think that can't get lost in the whole system. And so nobody denied that we needed bail reform. I think it just, the way that it went about was extreme, and it needed to be brought back in. You know, we're a country where we have law and order. And nobody likes when there's no law and order, because then people get hurt and people lose things, and it's a no-win for everybody. I have to say, I learned a lot from my friend Marcus, just in our conversations, you know, about things that I would never have known about, that I would never have imagined could happen. And I think as a responsible legislator, I have a responsibility to listen to that and to learn from that. And that is how you have to go about making changes. And that's what we need to be doing here. So his reforms were just not responsible and created bigger problems for so many of the people in the communities that he was trying to win over by doing that. It really was a bad situation for everybody. So hopefully we have this balance. And then we had George Floyd, and that brought up and brought to light a lot of what is underlying. From that, we now have, especially in Nassau County, I mean, we have actual real police reforms. We have community policing, which in my opinion, I think is exactly what we need, especially someplace like this or in our smaller communities. where the police know the kids, they know the teenagers, they're walking around. The kids should never, people should never be afraid of the police, that they're going, you know, that they can't, you know, drive down the street, or they get, that should never exist. We live in an area, you know, it's one thing if you're driving along the thruway, you don't expect to know that cop. But when you're around here, you know each other. We should all be working together. And Nassau County has really tried to get that started. They have worked very hard at their community police outreach programs, their reforms. Their reforms were really, I have to say, very, very bipartisan approach. They really worked together and again, asked a lot of the people and listened to a lot of the responses. So hopefully, you know, I don't know Governor Hochul, she's new and has been faced with so much in such a short time that I really don't even know what her, you know, priorities with this will be or what she's planning on doing. I do know that we have been trying to get through the executive orders that were laid out. That's where the county police reforms, the local governments, they all had to have their reforms in. So I think, you know, those things are moving forward. And I think through those reforms, we have things, you know, all these different things, you know, the Anti-Chokehold Act, all of these things, they came from the people. They came from people saying, this isn't right, this shouldn't be happening. And that's, you know, in order for this all to work, the police need to be trained on how to get along and you know, it's a funny dynamic to say respect, you know, respect the person that you're arresting or that's committing a crime. But as a human being, they need to be respected. You can't, you know, I remember with all these shootings that were going on, I had said, you know, whatever happened to shoot the knee or shoot the foot? Like you don't shoot to kill. You know, it's a mindset. So I believe that this is all emerging and that, you know, I'm hopeful that there's a balance that's going to be struck here.
With the police reform, I'm on the committee for the Long Beach Police Reform, so I help give input on that one. I'm on the reform committee for the county. I work with Commissioner Ryder. I gave input on that. I think the county did do a good job. I think Long Beach did a better job than expected, but they also have to interact with the community more. And when we say we want community policing, it's not really asking for that much. I give Commissioner Walsh a lot of respect because he does get out, he makes his officers get out and engage with the residents. Don't just drive down the block, park your car, walk, say hi, I'm officer such and such, I'm new or I'm this. Get to know the people. Because a lot of times what we have seen in the past was, you know, cops will ride by, if you're walking down the block, they might circle the block 4 times. And the 4th time, don't you be causing no problems. You're not doing anything. You know, and that's what a lot of residents over in this area have experienced. It's just like, why are you targeting us? But if I drive down the West End, I see you laughing and joking with them, but you over here trying to hunt us. We just want that same respect. And I think a lot of people took the police reform wrong because they thought it was okay, everybody's anti-cop. They're not anti-cop. What they want was the same respect that they seen other people get. So I don't think it was too much to ask for. I know with the county, they have the PAL. And one thing I asked for with Long Beach to see if Long Beach can get a PAL. You know, whether you partner at the MLK Center, you do it centralized where people can feel comfortable. It's in the middle of town, where you can have a police athletic league. It's not just about basketball, but you interact with the police. You know, they can go play chess or checkers, you know, shoot basketball, play a little pool. Engage with the children, engage with the teenagers, engage with the adults, engage with the seniors. You know, this is what people pretty much wanted. It wasn't what a lot of people took it to be. You know, I think it got spun the wrong way for political reasons, which it really wasn't. It's just treat us fairly, you know.
And I will certainly speak to Commissioner Walsh. I will say in Inwood, one of the towns in my district, and even in Lawrence, at Lawrence High School, I've gone to basketball games between the police and the local kids at the community center, and that it was phenomenal. It was so much fun, and it was, it's enjoyable watching how they interact and they get to know each other and they become, friends. So when they're walking down the street and they see the cop driving by, they're like, hey, how you doing? That's what we need. We need them to trust each other and respect each other. And then that's what, that's how it used to be when you had small towns.
So I was just recently talking to Commissioner Walsh about the same exact subject of community building, and he was talking about some of the issues are the hours. Police officers don't get paid, so they're not going to volunteer their time. So it'll be hard to get people. And another issue was, I guess, the union. Would the union be able to do something if someone sprained their ankle? So I mean, it wasn't a no, but there were so many concerns. So I guess.
You know what? Nassau County is figuring it out. So let me talk to Commissioner Walsh, because there's no reason why Long Beach can't figure it out. If it's
All right,
something
and
that's
please contact me
financial,
as
we'll
well,
figure
so
out.
we can get it going.
Even if there's a
Please,
grant out there that would, for something like this. I mean, this is, a necessary thing. It really, really fosters good relationships.
In the chat, they're saying that we need a PAL program in Long Beach. And would you please elaborate, especially a place like this in regard to community policing? I guess that's when you made the comment that, especially in a place like this, community policing is a great model. Elaborate on that, please.
Well, I think, if you know the people in your community, if you're a police officer and you know the people, I'm a cop and I'm walking down the street and, hey, Marcus, how are you? How's it going? What's going on? How's work? You know each other. There's a mutual respect. You're not afraid of each other. You're not defensive. You're not suspicious. It removes all of that. And that's where we get into trouble. When somebody's suspicious unnecessarily, when somebody's defensive unnecessarily, we have trouble. So we can remove that by having everybody come together and work together and foster this relationship among our community. It's not like we live in Manhattan where, that would be a much harder thing to do in Manhattan. It's a bigger task. City of Long Beach is, we're a big city here, but for Long Island, but not so big that our police can't know our youth and our, there's no reason why we can't. They used to. We used to, you always knew the local cops.
I know number 5, we still talk about Governor Andrew Cuomo and policing specifically, but one of the things that pointed out to me in my community is I walk by these signs that say Andrew Cuomo on them. They say opportunity zones. And there's a couple of opportunity zones in this area, and it just feels like a target for a gentrification project. And I was wondering, now that we have a new person in place, is there some way to remove these opportunity zones in our area? Is there something that can be done?
I can certainly look into it. I mean, I know we've discussed this before, but I can certainly ask. I know that was one of his, Governor Cuomo liked to have, lots of capital projects.
That was also a question from an email. They were wondering if you could change the BOA, the Brownsfield Opportunity Area, to not represent the resident neighborhood, but just the industry behind the residents, where the pollution actually would be, so that people and developers would stop coming in to buy up the houses instead of cleaning up the pollution in the soil and the waterways.
The cleaning up the waterways and all that, I believe is still, much of it is federal. And I know the town is working on one, and the county, they're working on the effluent waste, all of that pipeline. But so I think that's separate, but if they're saying that the money is going there rather than, yeah, I can look into that also.
I believe they're thinking that the concern is that if you have so much opportunity that's only happening in a very small square footage of space, and where there used to be industry in Long Beach, for example, right back here, we had an incinerator, which was shut down. We have a sewer that, for those of us who live further down the way, we don't smell those smells, but you smell it right here. For myself, I live on the beach, so I don't smell what they smell here. And they've grown accustomed to smelling every week. Also, how the trash is dealt with and the lumber is dealt with on the bay side, which has now become prime real estate. But the people are not cleaning up any of these areas. They're just buying the houses and getting whatever the incentive might be, which is causing the people to have to move out and is raising the tax
Right.
base and is also raising the cost of living for everyone. And this is not, as many people would love to assume that it is, that wealthy beach community that we just thrive and just pour our money all over the streets. As we see, we still need to fix our streets. But the problem is that they want to change some of these ideals because people are trying to live and they feel like they can't. And they can't compete with any investor or any of these opportunities, which don't seem to be for the residents.
Right. Well, that's a concern that I think both sides of the water are facing. There's a big concern with overdevelopment down on that side. It's prime real estate, and that's what developers see. That's their end game. They're forgetting about the people that are lost in the process. And I think that it's certainly an addressable issue for sure. Who I would be addressing it with is going to be interesting. We're still waiting to see who's getting appointed to what, who's being removed from the old administration and who's coming in. It's an ongoing process, but we'll get somebody at some point that can address the issues.
Before we close this section out and go into the next section, we just want to state for everyone who's online and everyone who's in the room, for those who don't know, we had it very structured as far as what we're discussing tonight, and we're getting ready to open the questions up on the floor. But before we do that, we need you to know what exactly our Assemblywoman does for us. And for those who don't know, she's a part of the New York State Assembly, which has 150 members, correct?
Yes.
About 105 right now are Democrats, 43 Republicans, 1 independent, 1 is vacant. They make a salary of about $110,000 a year. Carl Hasty is the speaker. He's a Democrat. The majority leader is Crystal Peoples. And the minority leader is William Barclay. All right now they're in a Democratic-led assembly. The assembly is the lower chamber of the New York State Legislature. For those who do not know, that means law making. That's it. Legislate. They make the laws, right? Alongside with the New York Senate. They work hand in hand in Albany. They work with the governor to create laws and make a state budget. So things that are put together and allocated in different regions of the state is done in this arena. They pass bills on public policy matters. They set the levels for state spending and raising and lowering taxes, and also voting to uphold or override the gubernatorial vetoes, which means just vetoing the governor. Gubernatorial is just a nice fancy word for governor. So this is what they do. So things that you see right now, we have a huge infrastructure plan going in that pretty much came from the president, I believe, on all our highways and roads, but these things are trickling down locally. You've seen in Long Beach that they're redoing infrastructure in the street, pipes, redoing, repaving streets, all of these things. These things are allocated through our budget in our state. And this is one of the people who helps to vote on these things. And these are some of the things that your questions should probably be focused on. Now, there could be other questions as far as her actually dealing with them hands-on that may not be her area. So education we talked about, that's the Department of Education, and they make decisions in the state. So we can probably get you some names and numbers of people, but that's not necessarily her area. So right now you have some papers.
Well, I will say, if I can just say, so you described what our responsibilities are legislatively in Albany when we're in session, but as the Assemblywoman, I have, many more local responsibilities to my constituents. I can help with just about anything. We get calls if the street light's out, if there's a pothole, if the telephone pole, is leaning and they're afraid it's gonna fall, things that regular people don't even know who to call, how to get something. We can help with that. We help with social services. We help, like I said, I've been trying to help this woman get housing. There's really nothing that we're not willing to try and help with, even if it's not necessarily my jurisdiction. I'm here to help, and that's what we do. My office is, very responsive. We will, even if we can't help, we will try. We will make some phone calls. We'll see who, even if we could connect you to the right department or, office that can get you what you're looking for. We try to facilitate getting people what they need. As far as, my areas, everybody that's in the assembly is assigned to specific committees, and the committees vote on these bills that come through that eventually get put down onto the floor to be passed, to become law. So a lot of the committees are very, very important. That I'm on the education committee, I'm on the mental hygiene committee. I'm the ranker for the people with disabilities committee because I have my experiences with people with disabilities. I can help with so many different things in those areas. I get calls, I get referrals from other members, from other assembly members or even senators, from people up in Syracuse or Rochester that they're having an issue with their loved one with a disability. I don't care where you live, I'm going to try and help you if you have a question or if you have a need. So that is, really locally much more of what I do, which is why, we try to put this together. Like you say, not necessarily my area, the whole bail reform and all that. I'm not on those committees. That wasn't my area of expertise, but I still have a responsibility to know what's going on. So, it was the education of my life that continues as I get older and older, but it's really only so that I can at least represent the people that, and being a minority in a majority house, I was told at the beginning, oh, you'll never be able to do anything. You won't have any power. That's important, I guess, if you want power. I don't really want power. If I can craft legislation or bring a specific need to the table and I can get that done by working with a majority member, I am very happy to do that. And that's how I get things done. I work across the aisle. I work very well with a lot of different people in a lot of different areas to be able to make changes that need to get made. So that's how I can help.
So, sorry, Dan Creighton from Long Beach. First, let me thank North Park Civic. This was great. Thank you for doing this. I think this is great for us as, your voting people in the area to really get to know you and know what you can do. I think this has been great. Thank you for setting this up. It's been great. My question is a little more general for Long Beach. I mean, everybody knows we're having all these fiscal issues. I was wondering, as our Assemblywoman, what you could do to kind of help the city through whether it's grants, earmarks, through the budget, maybe getting some capital money. What can be done to really help Long Beach fiscally from the state level to help us get out of these problems that we're in right now?
So we actually have been working on this and trying to help for several years now. We have had money allocated in the budget for the water issue that's persistent in Long Beach, trying to clean up the water and the pipes that need to be, the infrastructure is old. So we can help through that. We've helped with some of the costs, the cost to the city in trying to reorganize. The state was able to help pay some of that cost. So, financially, the city is in, a unfortunate circumstance, but the city manager that they've brought in has a background of turning that around for other cities that have been in similar situations. So she has, been working very hard, and she is very good at calling up me and Senator Kaminsky and saying, hey, can you help with this? Can we get funding for this? Can we maybe get a grant for this? We're always searching for grants, not necessarily always for, the fiscal trouble that they're in, but for different opportunities, different things for street projects, for different things, for libraries. There are many things within Long Beach that are strapped for money. So, there are a lot of different grant opportunities that we try and provide also. I don't think it was this past year, I think the year before, if we're ever given, as a minority member, I don't get that much bullet aid, but I got a library grant. And so I awarded it to the Long Beach Library. I do a lot of work with them. They host a lot of my seminars for seniors, and we do a lot of Zoom things together. So it was really, it was a great way that I could give back to this, public library that's helped me so much, to meet my constituents' needs. So, but it's something that we're constantly trying to figure out how we can help with that.
Excellent. We have another question. I'm going to ask this as it's two questions, but we'll put it in one. Through your office, is there any local business assistance available, or is there any local funding for the arts through your office?
Through my office specifically, there's no funding, no. We're the state assembly. we're that lower echelon of government. So we don't have any funding, but we always, if somebody's looking for funding for something, we will always do grant searches, and they don't have to only be state. There are federal grants also that we can search. So we'll always be willing to do that and help with that. We can't do the application for them, but we can always help them, provide them with the resources to do the searching.
I have a question here. When was the last time the New York State Assembly with the legislator voted to lower taxes in New York? What tax was decreased?
I have no idea. I certainly wasn't there. I mean, I do not like, we don't vote to increase taxes. It's funny, you feel bad because a lot of local governments, they'll, especially like upstate in the more rural areas, they'll want to impose, a motel tax on, or increase their motel tax. And we're very reluctant to vote for it because it's a tax increase, but then it's somebody's local bill. You're trying to help your local community, your local government. So it's, you have to really balance it. We have some members that just consistently will never ever vote for any of those kinds of, tax increases, or, there are some people that don't even like voting on tax cuts because they look at that as, hurting somebody somewhere else. But, a lot of tax cuts are necessary if or tax exemption. I shouldn't say cuts, I should say exemption. It's certain nonprofits are exempt, or religious institutions, or, they're trying to work for the greater good. So you'd like to be able to offer them the exemptions, but, you come under fire for it. I was walking a couple of elections ago, I was walking and some woman came up to me and she said, I remember you, I know who you are. You were the one that had all those tax exemptions for seniors. And that's terrible. I'm like, they're senior citizens, like they trying to help them, so you're not gonna please everybody.
So we are at the point of closing remarks from our wonderful Assemblywoman Miller. We want to thank you, first of all, for participating in this town hall. It will be broadcast on the North Park Civic page. We'll cut off that little wait time at the beginning. and then we'll get right into it. And we thank you so much for all that you do.
I want to thank you. These opportunities are not frequent enough. I love doing these kind of things. I like, like I said, I learn every day. I learn so much from Marcus. I learn from everybody that I meet. And the only way to do it is to actually come in and spend time and be with the people. We go on the community walks. I love doing that. I learned so much on those community walks, and honestly, it doesn't happen in every community. That I don't have this opportunity in every community. So I'm grateful that I have this opportunity with you all. So thank you for having me. Thanks for having Oliver.
Well, our resident Marcus Tinker, aka Deacon Tinker, will also be closing us out in prayer. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who participated online. And thank you all for who are going to watch in the future who missed it, but you'll see us. We thank you for coming in, participating, dropping in, and getting to know what your local government does for you.
Oh yeah, our Assemblywoman, she made lemon squares. They are in the back, so please take some. May we all stand so we can dismiss. That we will. Lord, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you for this town hall. We thank you for our Assemblywoman Miller. We thank you for her son. We thank you for everyone who came. We thank you for those who viewed on a Zoom. We thank you for those who submitted their questions via Zoom, via email. Thank you for the ones who asked questions in person. We look forward to doing more of these so we can have the better engagement and get more done. And we ask that you will bless the refreshments that are prepared. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night. God bless.